today we have a special treat for you. We spend a lot of time talking in generalities and giving overarching education, but today we're actually going to do a case study so that you get some of the specifics of how planning should be approached when you're looking at really kind of first hitting the easy button, focusing on income and optimizing your income streams. And then second, if you lean into the planning strategies that we spend a lot of time talking about, kind of supercharging the whole plan by adding cash flowing assets. So we're gonna walk you through a hypothetical here so that you can really get a feel for some of the things that are possible. And over the next couple of weeks and months, we're gonna make sure to integrate different case studies into this so that regardless of where you are in your life, you can see how an economics-based planning approach can make major changes to your overarching plan.
Yeah. So this one is one of my favorites because it's sort of kind of at the heart of what we do. So this couple, I think they're like 67, 68. So they're kind of on the back end of their career, and they've been working their whole lives, building a business, trying to get it up and running, dealing with the slings and arrows of sort of what that looks like, just the ups and downs of it all. And so it's like, hey, it's time to ride off in the sunset, and it's time to kind of have that exit. And the one that we're going to talk about today, there's some cool family things going on as a part of that. And so it's just been really neat to be a part of that. And so this one's kind of one of my favorites. And so they're 68 and kind of ready to make that exit. And the question, and Mary kind of posed it really great at the beginning, is, can I do that? Is this a possibility for me? Do I get to sort of enjoy the fruits of kind of what we've been building over the last, I don't know how long we've been doing this, 20 or 30 years at this point.
A long time. Well, and to me, this family in particular, I just absolutely adore because they are hard workers and they're very family oriented, and it's all about the kids and the grandkids. And it's salt of the earth, right? And to me, this is America, right? And it's truest.
That's why we do what we do, right?
Yeah, it's people who are doing something because they see a need and then working hard and building a really ethical business. And in conversation with him, I think his biggest fear has really been, can I retire, or do I have to keep working? Because he's ready, right? I think he's been ready for a couple of years and had to get some things in order and in alignment with the business so that he felt comfortable stepping out. But I don't know, to me, it's what you just said. It's why we do what we do, because we want him to be able to maintain the lifestyle that he's used to living when he exits. And a lot of times, people spend so much time taking the profit of their business and plowing it back into the business, trying to grow it, that they've almost, put a lot of their eggs in the same basket. And so it's fun to be able to show them, here's what you think you're going to have, but if we make the following changes, here's the position that you're in, and just see that sense of relief flood through them, right? Like, I'm going to be fine. This is going to be great. So let's jump into some of the numbers, just so we can set the stage.
Yeah. So 68, they're getting ready, and the exit is going to be, their savings up to this point, plus, selling their part of the business off and being able to kind of have that chunk of cash coming out. And so the path that they were on before we kind of got involved and sort of had the chance to help them out, he was heading towards an exit of about $60,000 to $62,000 a year, just from sort of the exit of the business and his assets. And with social on top of that, he was looking at about 110, 1 to 110.
Social for him and for his wife.
Yeah. So, so all in, so maybe 40 or 50 on social, and then about 60K out of just assets, doing it a very traditional approach. And just with that exit, they were going to be okay. They're not living under a bridge with a much cats, but it wasn't their lifestyle. It wasn't kind of what they
they're used to.
Yeah, it wasn't what they were used to. And so one of the things we did is, of the exit that they got from the business, they got a big check. Hey, here's your parting gift as you exit this business. We took about 40% of that, rediverted that over to be able to create those two legs of the stool, or the two wheels on the bike, whatever you want to call it, and to get more focus on how do we maximize income and really kind of balancing out their system. So tell everybody a little bit about kind of what that looked like on their side, and then I can kind of reveal what that looked like from an exit.
Yeah. So I want to make sure for people that have been following us, when Eric makes that comment, the two legs of the stool, you may have some clue as to what we're talking about. But if you're joining us for the first time, you're like, what on earth does that mean? I think it's really important. Yeah, what's happening? I think it's really important to understand just at a basic level, a little bit of what we're talking about here. So what's happened over the past 30, 40 years as people have moved away from a pension-based system into planning predominantly with 401k and stock market related investment tools, right, is that people have begun to focus almost exclusively on rate of return. And the research that has come out in terms of really since the mid 90s, in terms of what you can safely spend from an all investment portfolio, and that can be stocks, bonds, mutual funds, it can be a blended portfolio. But the generally accepted safe withdrawal rate in the financial services industry is somewhere between 3 and 4%. And some of the more recent research, because of the low interest rate environment that we've been in for such a prolonged period of time, even suggests that the number could be below 3%. So the focus of what we're doing here as someone is approaching their exit is moving where some of the assets are held to create one of two strategies. So the first one is a simulated pension, right? And I'm going to use some words here, which may, give people the willies right off the bat, just because of things they've read before. But I think it's really important to understand that just because you have some preconceived notions about how a tool can be used, or what that tool is, doesn't mean that 100% of those tools operate that way. So the first kind of option for a distribution, or the first way that we approach this, is that we want to take a blend of investment-based assets and whole life insurance. And the reason that we want to do that is that whole life insurance offers some guarantees that you cannot get from any other financial tool that exists in the marketplace today. And so what we really want is the cash value inside of that to be growing, and to know that it's guaranteed so that it never goes down in value, because that allows us to essentially use that tool as a shock market, or a shock absorber for the stock market, right? Or a volatility buffer, you can call it either one, so that when the market has fluctuations, rather than continuing to withdraw money while the market is losing, and even as your portfolio starts to recover, if you're withdrawing the recovery, you can see how you could easily deplete a portfolio over time. So what we want is to have an alternate source of capital that we can pull from, so that we can allow our investment portfolio to recover after any loss that happens. So that's one of the options. The second option is that we can use those same tools, but now we're going to focus on the death benefit aspect of the whole life insurance to create a simulated pension. Because that insurance, that death benefit that's permanent, actually gives us a permission slip to cannibalize the other assets at an aggressive rate, because whenever someone passes away, that death benefit replaces those assets for the remaining spouse. And then when the second person passes away, if they also have the whole life insurance policy, it replenishes the legacy. So simply by virtue of being more focused on the distribution, what we find is that generally we can increase what someone can possibly spend in retirement by anywhere from 30 to 70%. And we can make sure that there's a legacy for the next generation. And jokingly in the office, I like to say that I'm a have your cake and eat it too kind of girl. I know that if I can spend more during my lifetime and give my children an inheritance right at the time when they're probably retiring, that's a really big deal. And so that is, it's always put your own oxygen mask on first, and then worry about the person next to you, right? So the primary goal is always maximizing income, but a fortunate byproduct of that is that I get to be more generous either with my community or with my children and grandchildren eventually. So that's kind of it. So we're going to focus on two strategies here, right? They're both funded in the same manner. So we're looking at a blend of investments, which are tied to the financial power of fluctuating interest rates, And then we're looking at whole life insurance specifically because of the actuarial science component of this, which is the ability to kind of play by law of large numbers. And this is going to address mortality and longevity in the financial plan to make sure that we don't outlive our money. So hopefully that's the direction you wanted me to go. I'll get off my soapbox for a minute and hand it right back over to you.
Well, I mean, you touched on something I thought that was brilliant, and something that we talked with this couple about, and that I think talk to every couple about, is I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day or the next day. My crystal ball is in my other genes. I don't know, right? And so I think one of the cool things about the insurance piece of it, and the idea of those two strategies that are funded the same way, is that, you know, whether it's 1 year out or, you know, one of the other cases that we're looking at, or, you know, 30 years out, I don't know what the interest rate environment is going to look like when I get there, and I don't know what the market environment is going to look like when I get there. You know, right now, when we talk about, you know, simulated pensions, the history of the pension market is you give me $1 million, I go put it into this pension, this annuity that's paying you out, and the payout rate could be anywhere between 6 and 12%.
Right.
Meaning you give me $1 million and I'll give you somewhere between 60K and 120K. Well, that's a pretty wide range. It's like getting cable, you know, repair times from the cable repair company. I'm going to be there somewhere between 8 and 5 o'clock, and it's like that doesn't help me at all.
Then they show up tomorrow.
And then they show up, you know, 3 days later, right? And so, you know, I think that idea of, if you're exiting into an environment with a really, really high interest rate, you may do different things. Or if you're exiting into an environment like we're in now, where the interest rate environment's really bad or really low, then maybe a market-based exit looks more appeasing, or looks like a better deal. And so the idea to be able to pivot and choose today, knowing that I have no idea what's going to happen 30 years out or 5 minutes out, but I know I've got the tools to be able to pivot and make every outcome work in my favor. To me, it's a really cool thing.
Well, and that's something that we see really frequently when people come in and bring their existing financial plans, is that they're locked into a very specific income stream strategy, right? I'm putting all my income into investments. So regardless of what's happening in the market or with interest rates at any given time, that's my only source of capital. And that's part of the reason you have to be conservative, is that you don't know what's going to happen over your retirement. If you retire and you have a 2008 kind of experience early on, that can be absolutely devastating. And so almost, you know, I think about the whole point of economics-based financial planning, and it's to make sure that your plan works no matter what's happening. So whether, you know, if you lose a spouse, if you lose a job, if the interest rate environment is bad, if, you know, the market is taking losses right at the time when you really need growth, and, you know, if the tax rates go up, all those types of things have to be incorporated into the plan. And it's just to the point that you said just a minute ago, Eric, that flexibility is absolutely key. So we have to lay the foundation. And normally we get a chance to lay the foundation in advance for those choices. But sometimes people come to us, they're like, I'm retiring in the next couple months, make it happen. And so we have a little
Here's
bit
your chance to be a legend, Mary.
Yeah. What's your joke? I'm powerful, not magical.
Right.
Right. But I think what's important here is you're going to get to see, okay, here's some of the immediate choices that this family gets to make. But mentally, we want you to know that we are always building for plans and contingency plans. And that's part of the importance of having a system that takes advantage of two financial powers instead of just one, right? The powers being interest rate environment and actuarial science, is because you have more choices when you incorporate actuarial science into the overarching plan, because you are dealing with mortality and either building in a hedge or, in some cases, potentially some guarantees.
Right. Yeah, I think that's perfect. So he was heading, so just to reset the stage from the beginning, he was heading towards about 62,000 a year and just regular income if he never met us. And
using the assets that he had saved up and the money he was receiving for the exit of the business.
Correct.
If all of that was in the market, using normal withdrawal rates from just industry accepted amounts, 60-ish, that was his income.
Correct.
Okay.
And so what we did is we took about 40% of the exit money that he got from the business, And we used that to go to add the insurance component. He didn't have that already in his system. So we used about 40% of his exit to go put that in. And what happened on the back end of that, and regardless of whether he chose, the pension alternative or simulated pension or the market shock absorber, his income went up by about $48,000 the next day, just by being able to incorporate those two things. So just on the asset side, he went from about 62 to about 110
of income. So
of
I want
income.
to be really clear here. There is no magic formula where we are suddenly doubling his money, right? It
No,
is not that we're getting a higher rate of return than another advisor. And I think that's really important.
super important.
Just to make sure we stay compliant even.
Right.
There's nothing promissory here in terms of we're going to get better returns. The only thing that we're doing in this particular situation is changing the distribution strategy of these assets, right? So we're assuming when we're doing our comparisons that if there's any return on the dollars, it's the same for his original strategy and then what we're implementing. Again, the only thing that we're changing is the distribution mechanism.
Right. And I think you nailed something that was really, really important there. And I don't know if you caught it. So I'm a fairly anxious guy. Like I remember watching my dad when he was growing up, or not growing up, but whenever he was working, he had a really thick bottle of Maalox in his cabinet drawer and would come home after work and just take a swig or two of that thing just to like calm down. Right. It was disgusting. But I earned that, I come by that honestly. And so one of the things you said was brilliant is, if our solution was, hey, I'm smarter than the market and I can get you a better rate of return and I can make it rain here, like my stress level would go through the roof, because I know functionally I have no control over what's going to happen. I may have better tools or some better adjustment strategies or whatever to kind of maybe shave off some of the ups and downs, but I'm playing on the margins. Right. And so if our whole strategy was built on I'm smarter than everyone else in the universe, like that's a recipe for failure all over the place. Like the change is just a shift in focus from rate of return to distribution. And that's the power, right? And it's offloading market risk and some of those other things so that we don't have to have sole reliance on, is this going to be a 2007 year or a 2008 year? But we're saying our chance and whatever we need to do to get a good year. Like that's not the solution. So good point on that. And so when you look at kind of from and to, right, he was heading to about 60. Now he's going to head towards about 110. And then when you add in social on top of that for about 50, then kind of with that easy button you keep talking about, he's gone from about 110 to about 160 just by being a little bit more strategic with what he's doing.
So Eric, let's talk a little bit about how that actually happens. So can we use real numbers for a second? Because I know for some of our audience, like this may feel like magic because you don't actually see where the cash flows are going, right? So can you talk about like total asset base? I mean, I'm guessing like all in, just because I don't remember the details, that between his exit and what he had saved up, is he at about 2 million?
Yeah, 2 to 2.5, but right.
So in terms of the logistics of how we actually accomplish this, what we've done is we've basically made a shift over roughly a 10-year time period where we are taking assets from the total that's invested and using that to deposit. And so can you kind of give the dollar amount that's moving over each year, just so mentally they can see it?
Yeah. So they've got about 2.2 million. Sitting in between the business exit and just cash that they'd already built up. So they've got a nice chunk of change. And so over the next 10 years, we're taking 90 grand out of that 2.2 million. 90 grand every year goes into these insurance buckets to help them grow and help them accumulate. And so it's what you and I kind of refer to as the left pocket to the right pocket strategy, right? I'm not creating money out of thin air. I'm just slowly bleeding it out, so that over time we have the ability to build that up. And then at the end of that 10 years, they're done. They can walk away. There's no more 90 grand required on the other end of it. But in order to make the insurance work from a tax efficiency and from just an overall efficiency standpoint, I couldn't take 900 grand right? 90 times 10.
All at once,
I
right?
couldn't put it in all at once. You got to kind of bleed it in to make it more efficient, make it work tax wise.
Right. So when I think about what's really happening, they're not paying for these contracts out of pocket, right? There's no cash flow requirement, anything like
Right.
that. So essentially what's happening is there's a retirement today-ish, right? Or within the next 12 months. And essentially each year there's just a check that gets written from the investment account to the insurance account. And at the end of a 10-year time period, they have dollar for dollar what they've put into the contract plus a death benefit in place. And then they have the guaranteed growth plus the dividends on the whole life policy that has been happening the entire time. So all this is a repositioning of where the assets sit. So in kind of the first strategy, let's talk about creating a simulated pension. The way that's actually going to work. And if you go back in an early podcast, you will actually find kind of the breakout where we walk through step by step how you do this. So definitely I would suggest going back to that if you feel lost right now. But if you look at what actually happens in that strategy, if they wanted to, they could take 100% of the dollars that were invested. So not the dollars in the whole life policy, but they could roll those into something called an income annuity, or there are different types of annuities that can accomplish the same thing. And what I would say is there's probably about 4 or 5 annuities on the marketplace that this really makes sense to consider with. And then there's a lot that we just wouldn't look at all because the fee structures don't work or the payouts don't work or we don't like the company, right? And so what
especially
happens
in this case, there's a lot of those wouldn't be appropriate. Yeah.
Right. So that the income annuity option basically puts you into a position where you give up control over the asset, you give it to the annuity company. The annuity company is going to pool those assets with a bunch of other people who are doing the same thing, right? They're all in one investment pool. And so what happens is if one person dies early, the money that would have paid them out to life expectancy stays in the pool so that when another person lives longer than life expectancy, it's the money in the pool that's funding that. So you basically build in a safety net that controls for longevity. And then you get a guarantee because of all of that data that you will never run out of paychecks. So for some of our clients, you know, they just want to know the money's going to be there. It's always going to be there. They don't have to worry about it, right? That's one option. So in this environment, the distributions are still substantially higher than 3%. Right. For someone who's his age, you're looking at just over a 6% distribution. But sometimes there's concerns, especially like right now, where we know we're at the lower end of the interest rate spectrum, right? And so why lock in a lower rate for a lifetime? And there's also some concerns about inflation. So if someone is, you know, just wants the easy button and the paycheck, this can be a good option. But for other clients, they're looking at it saying, you know what, I think it might make sense to do the other option where the dollars stay invested, right? And just anytime his principal balance drops below what his investment account started with, we're just going to switch over and take the income from the cash value of the insurance policy. And then as soon as his market-based portfolio recovers, we just go right back over to taking income. And we're going to do that at a substantially higher than 3% rate because we have the cushion to the side. So that's where, having run the same type of simulations to figure out what you can safely withdraw, you can withdraw roughly around 7% in today's environment if you've got 8 years of after-tax income sitting in the cash value of an insurance contract, right? And that gives you kind of the same rough likelihood of that 3 to 4% withdrawal rate from your portfolio. So it makes a huge difference. And even though there's less money in the investment account, because you're able to withdraw more and you have that buffer, usually we're going to see a pretty big increase. So can you give kind of what the numbers actually look like for the simulated pension and then for the market shock absorber?
Yeah, the breakout between the two.
Yeah, because I know we've been talking in terms of averages.
Yeah. So and that's one of the cool things, and you'd mentioned this, and I wanted to kind of, as I'm vamping on some of this stuff, right? You're looking at one of the neat things is sometimes people they want the easy button, but they don't want it right now. Like they want the easy button, but based on what's going on in the market and interest rates, everything else, it doesn't make sense. Like for him, he's 68, but the interest rate environment's pretty low and the inflation rate's not very positive. So
Right.
for them, we'll probably end up doing a little bit of shock absorber first,
Mhm.
let them get a little bit older, let the market settle out a little bit, and then we may do some pension or some simulated pension on that side.
Right.
So
And while you're pulling up the data, I just want to add to that. Frequently, what we see is that people will use the simulated pension option to cover their minimum acceptable lifestyle to make sure they can pay their property taxes,
right.
their Medicare premiums, and maintain a lifestyle that they'd be okay with, although maybe not excited about. And then they leave the rest in the volatility buffer. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can slice the apple. It doesn't have to be done in one way or the other. And that's the beauty of it, is the choice.
Yeah. So for the volatility buffer, so the market shock absorber, the numbers that we're seeing, or the projections that we're seeing, are right around 115K. So
and that's without Social Security.
That's without Social Security. So that's about 115. When you look at what we would call the simulated pension option, you're looking at about 105. And that's really because the kind of suppressed interest rate environment right now. So if I kind of look at the average of those two, it's right around 110, which is kind of what we talked about. And so that kind of gives them some push a little bit on that side of, if we want to go a little bit heavier on market shock absorber for a little bit, let him get older. Pensions and interest rates have a tendency to get bigger payouts the older you get. And so maybe he gets a little bit older and then does some of that pullover. Like he pulls some of that over and gets the pension instead of all the money being in the market. But he allows him to buy time. And the great thing about these folks for what we've put together for them on that side is, Mary mentioned that you can do about a 7% withdrawal rate when you have a shock absorber, as long as you have about 8 years of income in the cash of the policy. One of the great things about where they are is we can do that same 7%, but they've got about 12 years of buffer. So they've got a lot more safety on that side of it. And that was kind of one of their keys is, look, we're going to be fine, but we want to make sure that we're not a burden, that we leave some cash to the kiddos and the grandkids, and make sure that it's not just about us. I mean, again, this is one of my favorite people on the planet, right? They're really all about other people and doing good stuff. So,
well, and think about what that really means. That means out of, if they're 68 today, right? And we just do a projection to age 100, that's a long time. That's 32 years. Knowing that 12 of the 32 years, they can source their income from the cash value of the life insurance policy gives them a huge cushion for market volatility. I mean, you're talking about more than a third of the time being able to buffer the market. And that is extremely conservative, right? And so I love that moving into a space where they're actually more conservative and more efficient, that they can increase their income by, it's almost double, right? It's
so what is that?
Right there.
70 something percent. So 110 minus 62, right? Yeah, 77.4% for the nerds in the room, right? So.
Yeah, that's a huge increase with a much higher safety position. And I think especially it's easy when we're young to think, oh, it's fine, I can handle it. But when you get to the point where you actually stop working and there isn't additional income coming in, it's amazing how many people have very different opinions than they did when we first started working with them. And so I love that we're able to build in safety here and still increase the outcome. And again, this is not chasing rates of return. This is creating much more efficient distribution. So what we want to do kind of moving forward is just make sure that we're giving you in terms of what we've done, so that you can get a feel for how this type of planning can actually change your life. So thank you so much for joining us. If you have questions about the specifics of today's episode, feel free to reach out to us. You can find me at The Wealth Woman on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Eric, where can they find you?
Yeah, and I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Ericonomics with Eric. And,
wait, say that again. I like Ericonomics, but I don't think that's what you actually meant.
Well, I'm going to TM that crap out of that.
Yeah, you should.
I'm at Economics with Eric on Facebook and Instagram, and then just Eric Alexander.
I kind of think that you need to change your handle, Eric. Like, I think you're on
Ericonomics. What could go wrong? So, thank you guys. Hope you have a great week.